All right, so we've got our drive cage installed into the enclosure. Actually, it's just sitting in there. I don't want to, it doesn't need to, believe me. This is 4 power supplies on that rack is plenty heavy to keep it down. So there's no need really to drill it into the bottom of the case and secure it in there. In my opinion. Yeah, everybody has their own opinion. So the next step is to use some of these nylon washers that I went and picked up at the hardware store. I think they were like 15 cents a piece or 12 cents a piece. And these are about a quarter, or I don't know, quarter inch or a half inch or whatever. And all I'll do is I'll mark the location on the board, on the backer board, using a fine tip marker. We'll go right down through, and then we'll use the drill. We'll go ahead and drill some pilot holes for both the F16v3 and for the backup for the expansion port. The only trouble is that we're using some screws here, some longer screws. We've got some machine screws. They're 16 by 32. These will slide right through just fine. There's some nuts here for them. The only thing is that we have to make sure that wherever we screw these down through, they're not going to affect the placement of where the power supplies are at. The idea is the boards will have all of the wired connectors going down or coming up through the case in the front here. We're going to eventually install our cabling in the front. All right, from this angle, I'll go ahead and lift this up. As you can see here, we're not going to have much room. I don't need a lot of access to the bottom of the case. I just need enough room to be able to slide my cables in and out from here in the front, and the same clearance for here in the back. So I cut the backer board just so that each side has about a clearance of about a ½ inch, which is more than enough, or maybe it's 5/8 of an inch. That's the thickness of one of these cables that I've got from Ray. As I was saying, the goal now also is, with that in mind, is to determine where the power supplies are located commensurate to the location of our installation or mounting hardware. So I'm looking at the back end of the case right now, and I see that from here to here is a no-go location, but everything on the outside of those places are just fine. So with that in mind, the other thing we need to know is where are the actual physical rails. And if we lift up here, we can see that the rail is here. We want to avoid that. And I'm going to go ahead and mark the expansion port for the F16v2's expansion port. Now let's go ahead and match this up. We shouldn't be interfering with any of the drives here on the V3. And that's basically it. Now let's go ahead and set this off to the side, remove the backer. We've got our board marked out. We're going to just go ahead and pre-drill our holes. I only need 8 of these because we're only putting 8 things through to the board, but I wanted to dry fit and test to see if we were going to have any. Okay, so right about there is probably how much room we'll need to use our washers on here. The nylon washers I've got to stand off the board, and then probably a little bit more space for the small washers up above. And the board probably is going to be that high. So we'll go ahead and look and see if we're interfering with anything down below. We can see we only have just a very small bit of that hanging out, and it is not even touching anything. So it looks like this placement for the bolts is going to be just fine for the F16v3. Next, we'll go ahead and drill the holes out for the back one. All right, we're back. We've done some modifying to the original plan, which was to go down. Instead of down, we're going to actually go up. This was Rob's idea. So now we have zero interference with the power supplies, and so we know we have no interference. So I'm just going to start threading our nylon standoffs, nylon washers, I guess these are. On the back side here, we'll start with the expansion board. Now they might be just a little bit off because of the way the holes were drilled, but it looks like that is going to fit just fine. Now I'm using some more shallow washers to stand off the hex, and let's go ahead and start screwing those down. There we go. We have plenty of room now for our F16's expansion port, the differential board, which is going to be produced in the near future. We'll have room here to install the differential board so that I can use 4 individual satellites that will once again be installed to run outside of the case, so making this F16v3 build even more powerful. We've managed to modify everything on the backer board. It's set, and we have the Falcon mounted. Next, we are going to work on installing our pigtails, and what we're going to use is we're going to use these awesome little cable glands there. They're labeled as, right on the unit, they're labeled as PG7s. I also have these are I believe PG9s, and I will be using those for running power to the power supplies through the sides of the case for each side, for each power supply, that is. But I wanted to show you how these work. Cable glands are really, really affordable. You can find them on Amazon. You can get a pack of 10 for what, $1.50 or $2, maybe $2.50 a piece. But I got like 100 of these, and they're very simple to operate. Like I said, I got probably 100 of them for like $7 or $8 or $9. And also, I wanted to point this out. I love using these little plastic Ziploc storage containers for standing off to the side, or to hold off and display stuff like up on a shelf or something. Whenever I'm looking for something, I can clearly see through it. It's not like a bin, or it's not in a box somewhere. All of my RGB stuff is literally in these kind of bins where I can reach up, grab it, pull it down, take the lid off, and I can use it. So I thought that was something neat I wanted to share with everybody. So then the last half of this is when we go to make our drills into the side of the case, we have this nut, this retainer nut. So when we insert the case, insert the cable gland into the case, then we enter from the inside of the case. We put this into the case, and then we use this nut, this plastic retaining nut, and screw it down, and that maintains our integrity of the wire through the outside enclosure. So this, again, this is waterproof according to the website that I ordered it from Amazon. So that's the next step we're going to go through. So we're going to go ahead, tear all these apart, and start installing them on our pigtails. And then the next step after we get all of these loaded up is going to be drilling out all of the holes for our outputs. But Rob came up with an awesome idea. He had some Boscoyo pixel strips laying around in his shop, and as you can see here, we've got a section of 8 cut out, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to take a Sharpie, a marker, and I'm going to draw the circle. And what I'll do is I'll go back through, and I'll probably use this here step drill bit, which you can find at any hardware store, but they're the most affordable at Harbor Freight. I don't know exactly how big of a hole we're going to need until we get into this. But all we have to do is find out what that size of the hole is for the cable gland. Once we have all our holes marked, we'll go ahead and drill them out. We'll get the first 8 done, and then we'll take this off. We're going to lower it down to this level here, and we're going to offset it to the right here or to the left. And we'll label them the same way the F16v3 is labeled, which is the bottom is going to be where the first output is, and the second output is up above. So it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and so forth. And it'll give a little bit of variation to it, and it'll still keep it condensed in one area, so the length of my cables are going to make it out of the front end. Now, conversely, whenever I do eventually get to the final build with the expansion port, I'm going to have to do the same thing, and I'll do the same thing through the back of the case, because the back of the case will be where I run the pigtails out for the expansion. So we're going to get started cutting, drilling, and assembling. So we've actually figured out, thanks to Boscoyo strips, we've figured out that 1/2 inch is the size of these cable glands. Don't try that at home, you could cut your finger off. The reason we know that 1/2 inch is the right size is because it fits perfectly with the cable gland. The cable gland will go through the case, and we'll secure the cable gland with the appropriate nut on the back side and tighten it down. Once it's tightened down, that's a great way to route your cables. Now the other thing is, if you run Boscoyo strips and you have pixels at the bottom, pixels on your Boscoyo strips, God knows why you would buy Boscoyo strips unless you're putting pixels through them. But imagine if you added, this is Rob's idea also, one of these cable glands right at the bottom, and you run your pigtail through there. There you have an automatic strain relief on the bottom of your pixel strips to make sure that your pixel strip isn't pulling off of your pigtail from the bottom of the string of pixels. So great idea. I'm going to modify almost all of mine to do that in the future. That's a great idea, Rob. So we're going to take and drill all 18 of these holes, or 16 of these holes right now. Plastic makes a heck of a mess.
Shut this off for a second. Well, you can just edit it. Here, I'll even be nice to you, Clyde, because you're my friend.
Alright, so the next step is going to be inserting all of our wiring into the enclosure and adding our cable gland for each and every one. Whenever you mount these into the enclosure, you're going to put the cable gland cap in with the round side down. That way it's facing the outside of the exterior, because it's going to screw in from the front. So the cable will enter in just as I'm about to do. And I don't want to add, I'll go ahead and enter everything back into the case here. I don't want to add a lot of slack into them, but they're very easy to change. But as you can see, that's pretty much all I need just to get to the first output of the controller, is to go right there. Whenever when we go to add in our 4-pin Euro plug connector to this, this will just be able to sit very closely right to the top of the board. We won't need a lot of cable management anywhere. The cable management is already going to be done because of the physical location. Now I'll go ahead and turn this sideways so that you can see maybe the way the glands are literally straight in here. So this side of the board here, this is going to be the first output, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So we'll be in good shape as far as that goes. Alright guys, we got our cable glands all run through the enclosure. What's nice is to adjust the length of the cable wherever it's going to go. For example, this far one here, I'm just going to loosen it slightly. I can slide it in and out, and after we've got it exactly where we need it to be, we can just go ahead and tighten it down so that when we make our connection. So we're going to connect up to our outputs using our 4-pin Euro pluggable connector. The way pixels are set up on the Falcon F16v3 is with, and I'll pull this out real quick before we start plugging anything in. I don't know if the camera could be able to pick this up or not. Across the bottom here we have, you can see on each output, this is S1, S2, this is output 1, 2, 3, 4, just as we've laid it out on the enclosure. And the first pin on the left is always your ground. The next pin to the left is the clock. The next pin is your data. And the final pin on the right is your voltage positive. So everybody has their own way of setting up their pixels. There is no tried and true universal standard for connecting up pixels to a board. So it's always important for you, whenever you're starting out with pixels, pick one way and stick with it. And how I have decided to stick with it is blue is my positive, yellow is my my data, and brown is my ground. Now these are, of course, these are from Ray. I've ordered these years ago, and I've been using his stuff for years. But recently Ray sent me some pixels that were a little bit backwards. They had the connectors on them, but the blue was actually the ground and the brown was actually the positive. So don't assume anything whenever it comes to connecting up your pixels, but just make sure that whenever you are connecting your pixels that you do it congruently throughout your display, so that if you should be using this, say this controller runs your Mega Tree this year, that next year that you can use this in some other area of your display, because you're going to do some other upgrades and you're adding a different controller. So if you keep it continuous and congruent throughout, then you won't have any trouble with all the pixels the way you have them set up. So with that, we'll just keep going. Alright folks, we just finished it all. It's all hooked up. It's all ready to go as far as pigtails. Pretty much the only other things we have left to do is connect up our power, and we have to get power into the bottom side of the board, into all of the power supplies. So we're going to go ahead and get started on marking these out. Whoops. Rob, it fell. What did you do that for? Your tape isn't secure. There we go. I saved it.
The tape was made by Holiday Coro.
Whoops.